Special Envoy of President Trump, Steven Witkoff, concluded a nearly 3-hour meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, marking a significant moment in the ongoing backchannel diplomacy between the two nations. Notably, the meeting took place as a ceasefire deadline in Ukraine set by President Donald Trump is rapidly approaching. Facing a series of tough actions from the White House, Russia continues to emphasize its principle of non-escalation, expressing readiness for negotiations, but rejecting any unilateral impositions. Moscow appears to maintain a calm stance, showing no intention of yielding to President Trump's demands. How do experts assess Russia's moves? Join us to find answers in today's videos.
On August 6th, Russian President Vladimir Putin held a meeting with U.S. President's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff at the Kremlin. The discussion between President Putin and Special Envoy Witkoff, lasting over 3 hours, was described as constructive and achieved significant progress in promoting bilateral cooperation and addressing solutions for the conflict in Ukraine. Kremlin Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov stated that the meeting between President Putin and U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff was constructive and effective.
It was quite a useful and constructive discussion. When it comes to its topics, first of all, it was the Ukraine crisis. And the second topic were prospects of possible development of strategic cooperation between the U.S. and Russia. On our part, in particular on the Ukrainian issue, some signals were transmitted. Corresponding signals were also received from President Trump. The situation now is that our President Putin possesses full information, including both our signals and signals from Trump, while Trump has not been told about the results of this meeting yet. So I would refrain from more detailed comments. Let's see when Witkoff will be able to report to Trump on today's conversation. After that, we will be able to complement these comments of mine with something more substantial.
Following the meeting, U.S. President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, stating, "My special envoy, Steve Witkoff, just had an extremely productive meeting with Russian President Putin. The meeting made great progress." Trump also noted that he had briefed some European allies on the preliminary outcomes of the meeting, emphasizing that everyone agrees that the conflict must end and we will work to achieve that in the coming days. President Trump also told reporters at the White House that he and President Putin might meet next week, but he did not disclose the time or location of the meeting. Previously, Trump had threatened to impose new sanctions on Russia, along with 100% tariffs on countries purchasing Russian oil, unless Putin agreed to a ceasefire in Ukraine. Timothy Ash, an analyst at Chatham House, told Reuters that Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely to seek some concessions and buy time to avoid U.S. sanctions.
Sanctions impose a cost on the countries levying the sanctions. There's no cost-free sanctions regime, and you have to be prepared to bear a cost if you think the target of the sanctions is doing something that you think is going to significantly hurt you, and there's a reason for sanctions, right? So it's kind of a cost-benefit kind of analysis, and I think in the end, Western countries still don't really take the threat from Russia seriously enough to justify a significant cost for themselves. That's the problem. 100% tariff on Russian exports to countries like India will probably close off all Russian exports of oil and potentially commodities to global markets. So that would be very disruptive, given that Russia accounts for around 9% of exports for oil, right? So I think he's backtracking. Putin really, I think, has decided he wants a long war, right? And time plays on the inside. And I think this suggestion of this air corridor, whatever you want to call it, he's buying time, right? He wants to avoid anything that would see more sanctions levied on him. They're a little bit nervous about the tariffs on the India tariffs, right? The 100% situation, but they don't really think Trump will actually do it. But they think by throwing a little bone to Trump, Witkoff's there, letting Witkoff come back with something, it'll buy them a bit more time to continue to wage war, because they think the longer they leave it, the longer they continue the fight, ultimately Ukraine will buckle, the Western alliance will weaken, appetite to continue to support Ukraine will kind of moderate, and in the end Putin will get everything he wants, which is the whole of Ukraine. That is the reality. Trump cares about, domestic politics, his own popularity at home. Americans care about gas prices. And if they cut Russia totally out of the global oil export market, inevitably oil and gas prices at the pump in the US would significantly increase. Does Trump really care about bringing this conflict to a close that much to take some heat himself in terms of domestic politics? I just don't think so, because he's actually not shown so far, a desire to do anything really hard and specific in support of Ukraine and to hurt the Russians, right?
On August 6th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited soldiers stationed near the front line in the Sumy region, northeastern Ukraine. He expressed gratitude to the servicemen who participated in the Kursk operation, a cross-border infantry offensive launched in August 2024, considered the largest attack on Russian territory since World War II.
1 year has passed since the start of the Kursk operation. I'm going to congratulate you on it and award you the best for really putting the Russians in their place. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Glory to Ukraine. Stay safe.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Russia appears to have a tendency to accept a ceasefire agreement, but he emphasized that the details of any agreement are of great significance, and neither Ukraine nor the United States should allow Moscow to deceive them.
Якраз дорогою від наших бригад тут на Сумщині я говорив з президентом Трампом, і це
While traveling from our brigades here in Sumy region, I spoke with President Trump. This was a conversation following the visit to Moscow by President Trump's representative, Steve Witkoff. Our joint position with our partners is absolutely clear and transparent. The war must end, and it must end honestly. It is very important that it be resolved honestly. European leaders were also on the call. I'm grateful to each of them for their support. We discussed what was said in Moscow. It appears that Russia is now more inclined to consider a ceasefire. The pressure on them is working. But the main thing is to make sure they don't deceive anyone in the details, neither us nor the United States. We proposed that in the near future, representatives of Ukraine and our partners, our national security advisors, should meet to define our position, our joint position, and our shared vision. For us, for Ukraine, this is very important. Ukraine will undoubtedly defend its independence, and we all need a lasting and reliable peace. Russia must end the war it started. All day today, I've been in the Sumy region with our brigades, our heroic men and women who are defending, actively defending our land, and who carried out our offensive operation in the Kursk region. Today marks the anniversary of the Kursk operation, a truly historical Ukrainian operation. We took the war onto the territory of the aggressor state, and we are still operating on its territory. We proved, at a time when many were talking about a deadlock and were losing faith in Ukraine, that Ukrainians know how to act effectively. And we proved that many of Russia's threats were mere bluff.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that he hopes to announce on Wednesday whether potential sanctions against Russia will proceed this week. Rubio said he has spoken with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who is returning from a trip to Russia, and further discussions will continue throughout the day.
After the Witkoff meeting with President Putin. Thank you. We'll have more to say about that later on. Ambassador Witkoff's on his way back now. We just got off the phone with him a few minutes ago. Some other discussions throughout the day, and then hopefully there'll be some announcements here fairly soon. Maybe positive, maybe not. We'll see. Did Russia agree to a ceasefire?
According to observers, it is very unlikely that Russian President Vladimir Putin will back down in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's ultimatum, which is set to expire on August 8th, along with severe sanctions. Accordingly, Putin is expected to continue pursuing his objectives. Reuters on August 5th quoted 3 sources close to the Kremlin as saying that Putin does not believe the new sanctions will be more effective than previous ones and believes that Russia currently holds an advantage on the battlefield. At the same time, the Russian leader does not want to anger Trump. One source told Reuters that Putin personally is concerned about the recent deterioration in U.S.-Russia relations and still hopes that Russia can restore trade and strategic partnerships with the West. The current negotiation process, in which Russian and Ukrainian negotiators have met 3 times since May 2025, is seen as an effort by Moscow to convince the Trump administration that President Putin has not entirely ruled out the possibility of peace. However, according to Reuters, these meetings have so far only focused on humanitarian issues and have not touched on the core of a long-term political solution. Analysts also believe that Putin's determination to continue the war stems from his belief that Russia is winning and from skepticism about the effectiveness of the new U.S. sanctions.
That's the latest update on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Thank you for following along. If you found the content helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated with our in-depth analysis.